Hello and welcome back to part 1C of our Revealed Reality Bible Study series on the Gospel of Mark. Make sure you go to the website www.wtfo.biz. Click on the Revealed Reality link right there on the front page, and you will be able to view all of the video files in this lesson series, as well as PDF files that you can view online, or you can also print them out for your viewing pleasure. So far, we've tried to establish the context in which the Gospels were produced. We understand that the Roman Empire was the number one superpower, and it was in charge of the Jewish people whom they had conquered. We understand that some terms in the New Testament, particularly in the Gospels themselves, did not originate with Christians, but these terms were a part of the everyday Greek language used in the Roman Empire. We talk about how the term gospel was a term widely used in the Roman Empire, but it was used to refer to good news about the Roman emperor. Christians came along and said, well, number one, we only believe that Jesus is the one and only true Son of God, and we will use this term to refer to Jesus, his death, his burial, his resurrection, his ascension back to heaven. We talked about how the term gospel could refer to the preaching about Jesus, or it could also refer to the content of the preaching of Jesus, again about his death, burial, resurrection, and ascension. Let's talk about now how the literary genre of the Gospels was first established. To our best knowledge, the very first known written gospel as a genre or a body of literature, the very first written gospel that we know of was the Gospel of Mark, written around 70 CE. So we're talking about a little under 40 years after the death, burial, resurrection, and ascension of Jesus Christ. Now, there were many other Gospels that predated the Gospel of Mark, which was the first Gospel written in 70 CE, or the Common Era. Some people use the term AD, after dominion, after the appearance of Christ. There were many other Gospels that were circulating in the various early Christian communities. Most of them were circulating in oral form, and most of them only contained the teachings and the sayings of Jesus. And these gospels circulated in the communities for many years. But it was the Gospel of Mark which first also circulated in oral form, people telling it as stories, word of mouth. The Gospel of Mark originated in oral form, but the Gospel of Mark was the first in its genre of gospel that, number one, was actually written down, but it not only contained sayings and teachings of Jesus, but it also then included narratives about Jesus, the things that he was doing that was associated with his teachings, where he was when he offered certain teachings, the result of or the impact of his teaching upon his listeners and various audiences, dramatic plots, which the earlier Gospels don't contain. Like the Gospel of Thomas is contains purely the teachings of Jesus. It doesn't contain any narrative plot, such as Jesus getting into a beef with the Pharisees, or Jesus being upset at people, or people being upset with Jesus. The earlier Gospels don't contain any of that. The Gospel of Mark, Mark's author was the very first author to put dramatic plots and other information to the teachings of Jesus. And so again, it was written around, to our best knowledge, somewhere around 70 CE or AD, about a little under 40 years after the ascension of Jesus. This writing established the genre, the literary genre that we know today as the Gospels. Mark's Evangelion, or Good News or Gospel, includes the preaching of Jesus and preaching about Jesus. Couple of additional things. We know that after the Gospel of Mark was written, then we had many other Gospels written in the same genre that Mark's author has established. We had in chronological order in which they were written in the New Testament. Mark's gospel was the first, written somewhere around, again, 70 CE or AD. And then we had the Gospel of Matthew, written somewhere around 80 or something like that. Then we had the Gospel of Luke, written somewhere between 80 and 85 of the Common Era. Then we had the Gospel of John, written somewhere probably around the early 90s or something like that. And we'll see that each of these Gospels, they're similar, but they're very different. Each of these Gospels tells some truths about Jesus from the perspective of the author and the communities that produce these. And so in addition to the 4 written Gospels in the New Testament, was recorded Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, but it should actually be Mark, Matthew, Luke, and John. After that, we have the Gospel of Mary. We have the Gospel of Judas. We have the Gospel of the Hebrews. We have many, many, many other written Gospels after the 4 Gospels in the Old Testament. But for whatever reason, and we'll talk a little bit about that, they didn't make the cut. When the Bible was put together, these other Gospels were not included. We're going to take another quick break, and then we're going to conclude part 1 of our study. So this first part is really an introduction to our study of the book of Mark. We'll be right back.